Dior takes over Paris. Not through a fashion show or a new product launch, but through a move that fundamentally shakes the structure of luxury fashion marketing, placing Park Jimin's face as the sole narrative center, not merely as an ambassador, but as a permanent icon in the house's history. Within hours, Dior's flagship store transformed from a high-end retail center into a monumental tribute site. The entire facade and interior were filled with one name, one face, one meaning: Jimin. What appeared to be a campaign turned out to be far from a promotional concept. Dior didn't just update its window displays. They built a shrine. Every glass, silk surface, lighting installation, all elements were designed to convey one message: absolute reverence. No press release, no social media post, no preview. Paris woke up to a silence interrupted by mass astonishment. Jimin's visual appearance didn't emerge selectively, but completely. From windows to ceilings. One corner featured a slow-motion video of him walking in the silence of the Paris runway. Another projected a whispered line from his personal narrative: "You always said I'd make them listen." That line wasn't a slogan. It was a declaration. Above Dior's main entrance, the house's logo was replaced by a temporary banner bearing an anonymous quote: "A tribute, a flame, a journey that changed everything." This phenomenon quickly drew global attention. Hundreds of visitors gathered within hours. Not because they were fans, not because they were customers, but because they realized this was no ordinary installation. This was a statement. The interior transformation was equally extreme. Dior removed the entire store concept and replaced it with a multi-layered exhibition. One room displayed Jimin's embroidered No. 7 suit inside a glass box, no different from a historical relic. On another side, a 360-degree projection showed backstage footage: his trembling hands before stepping onto the runway, his held breath, the tiny details not meant for public consumption. Everything was revealed. The peak of the installation sat at the far end of the room, an empty chair under pale lighting, where Jimin once sat to place his letter after closing the Paris Fashion Week show. Now, a second letter replaced the first. Handwritten by Jimin, framed and displayed with one sentence beneath it: "I didn't walk alone. You stood with me. So I give you this space, not as a brand, but as a memory. Thank you." And so the entire world began to ask, is this more than just a short-term collaboration? Is Dior crafting a new map of relations between brand and public figure? Within 3 days, Dior's sales in Paris jumped 340%. No discounts, no collection launch. Only Jimin's visual and emotional presence sparked the surge. Days after the first installation, rumors began to spread that this wasn't the final form of the collaboration. Internal sources revealed that Dior was most likely preparing a special position never before offered to a K-pop figure: eternal ambassador. Not seasonal, not rotating, but permanent. A status previously only given to legendary fashion icons. With this momentum, Dior moved quickly. The exhibition expanded into a global project. Mirror installations were reportedly set to appear in Tokyo, Milan, New York, and Seoul, each one featuring Jimin's personal letter in the local language, each with magnolia flowers, each with an empty chair. No stage, no catwalk, just a silent space filled with loss and awe. Yet, the true focal point wasn't the store or the installation. A report mentioned that Dior, with support from the Louvre's Cultural Commission, was preparing a one-night show inside the world's most iconic museum. A location long untouched by commercial realms, the Denon Wing, beneath the glass pyramid. Dior was said to present Jimin as a living art subject in an installation tentatively titled Vivant, N.O. choreography. No interaction. Just one chair, one body, one envelope, and a projection wall filled with hundreds of letters from global fans displayed in silence. A soundless projection. Complete stillness. Jimin would sit for 45 minutes, wearing a special version of the No. 7 suit, this time made from archival Dior silk dyed to resemble fading magnolia petals. All forms of documentation were banned. Cameras removed. Viewers invited selectively. The envelope held by Jimin was placed on the wall at the end of the performance. Upon touching the surface, invisible ink revealed the sentence, "I no longer ask permission to remember." No one spoke. No applause. No music. Dior wasn't selling fashion. They were exhibiting wounds. After the show ended, staff tried to clean the wall, but the envelope's trace didn't vanish. Its mark absorbed into the paint, and a new sentence appeared beneath it. Where sorrow exists, so does art. Dior let the mark remain. Now, Dior no longer treats Jimin as the face of a campaign. They treat him as a monument. Their strategy is not merely an emotional approach, but a cultural legacy formation. France's oldest fashion house isn't organizing a promotion. They're building an archive. The global fashion world did not stay silent. Chanel, Valentino, and Givenchy quietly ceased their approaches to Jimin. Not because they weren't interested, but because they couldn't compete. As one fashion editor said, "You can't own a phenomenon. You can only witness it." Vogue Paris released a special edition with no images, only white text on black paper. One word on the cover, Jimin. The content contained no photos, only a reflective essay. A digital installation of fan letters was planned to become a permanent feature in the Louvre, not as fashion, but as a space for public contemplation. With all these developments, one conclusion is undeniable. Dior is not exploiting a public figure. They are redefining the relationship between art, fashion, and memory. Jimin is no longer an ambassador. He is a narrative. And when the entire city of Paris transformed into a quiet stage echoing one name, one face, one wound, the line between fashion, tribute, and remembrance disappeared entirely. Dior erased that line, and the world witnessed it in silence. The impact of this event is not only recorded in sales statistics or public enthusiasm, but it begins to seep into the structure of the industry itself. Paris, which has long served as the interpretive center of luxury, lost control over the narrative. For the first time in French fashion house history, it was not the brand leading the direction of the message, but the individual immortalized by the brand. And that individual is Jimin. Experts in visual communication and popular culture called this event a turning point. A figure from South Korea's music industry, once viewed as a global influencer, has now become a medium for collective expression. Dior, with all its aesthetic precision and historical power, facilitated that expression, not just for artistic purposes, but as a public space for emotional experience. A space usually reserved for historical artifacts, now inhabited by a living human, an artist, a symbol. While other fashion houses remain trapped in the cycle of product releases and seasonal trends, Dior extends its influence into non-commercial realms. The global installations to be held in Seoul, Tokyo, Milan, and New York are not packaged as campaigns, but as exhibitions of inner journeys. Each location will display one constant element: an empty chair, magnolia flowers, and a letter from Jimin to the local public. Not promotion, not a launch, but a statement of identity. When the Louvre allowed use of the Denon wing for the Vivant show, it wasn't just approval of a creative collaboration, but institutional recognition of Jimin's cultural status. The Louvre, long home to works by Leonardo da Vinci, Delacroix, and Michelangelo, made space for a young man from Busan. Not because of his popularity, but because of the message he carried. The consequences are not trivial. Academia is now beginning to analyze what's called the Jimin phenomenon within the context of contemporary semiotics. He is no longer read as a celebrity symbol, but as a cultural entity uniting collective narratives, sorrow, loss, hope, and transcendence. Dior is merely the medium. The substance is him. Meanwhile, public reaction cannot be ignored. Thousands of letters continue to arrive at Dior's headquarters, not to order products, but to convey feelings. These letters come from individuals who have experienced loss, trauma, or simply want to say thank you. They are not fans, not regular customers, but people who feel seen by someone who has never spoken directly to them. The effect is transcendent. Dior is not selling fashion. They are facilitating the erosion of boundaries between private and public. Now, the entire global fashion system shakes. Jimin has created a precedent that expressions of silence can replace loud advertisements. That one slow movement can mean more than 10 seasons of collections. That emotional honesty holds economic value beyond market expectations. There's no denying that the Vivant installation has solidified Jimin's position as more than just an icon. He has become a paradigm. And Dior doesn't just support him. They built an altar. When he stands in silence, the world stops. When he presses an empty envelope to a museum wall, Dior's stock value rises. When he disappears behind the curtain without a word, history records it as a moment that shook the industry. Not for luxury, but for silence. The main question is no longer who is Jimin to Dior, but what has Dior learned from Jimin? And if it's true that the letters will remain displayed in the Louvre permanently, then it's clear. Dior is not archiving a collection. They are framing a new era. However, at this point, a question arises that cannot be ignored. Did this event truly happen? Or are we witnessing a deliberate narrative construction aimed at manipulating public opinion? Are we being shown a complete reality, or merely fragments shaped for specific purposes? Whether commercial or cultural, it is worth noting that the information forming the foundation of this narrative comes from various non-traditional platforms, such as TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, and fanbase accounts that are not entirely subject to rigorous journalistic verification standards. Is it appropriate to treat viral content as historical documents? Or, further still, have we lost the line between fact and fiction simply because the narrative is delivered with a convincing aesthetic? It is important to remember, in the modern communication landscape, visual representation is often trusted more than textual evidence. When short videos and aesthetic images replace investigative reports and document verification, society is easily swept away in visual euphoria. Isn't this a new form of perception control? Are we aware that we are being manipulated by artistic constructions that appear authentic? We must ask, did Dior truly dismantle the entire interior of its store for one individual? Did the Louvre, an institution highly selective with its partnerships, truly grant exclusive access to a figure from the pop entertainment world to transform the Denon Wing into a space for public contemplation? Without official documentation, without coverage from major news outlets, how could the public so readily believe this narrative without any doubt? Statements such as cameras were prohibited, there is no documentation, and everything happened in silence sound more like literary tactics than actual procedures of a formal institution. So, is this an ultra-modern marketing strategy, using mystery as a tool for emotional penetration? Or is there truly a new cultural movement deliberately distancing itself from traditional market logic, choosing silence as a form of resistance? And if it is true that there was no official announcement from either Dior or the Louvre, why did most of the public accept this information as though it had been validated? Is it due to collective faith in Jimin's reputation? Or is this the result of mythologizing public figures in the digital age, when personas are no longer shaped by media, but by uncontrolled mass perception? Today's society lives within a highly fluid information system, where reality and fictional narratives can imitate each other perfectly. There is no longer a clear distinction between actual events and content strategies. Therefore, this question deserves to be asked seriously. Did Jimin truly sit for 45 minutes beneath the Louvre's glass pyramid in silence? Or are we consuming a metaphorical story fragmented for artistic purposes? If we accept this narrative without further review, we participate in creating a false reality continuously reinforced by algorithms and collective emotion. Are we aware that what we consider to be truth today may merely be a reflection of our own desire to believe? Furthermore, when social media becomes the sole channel for disseminating information and the main platform for shaping public opinion, verification becomes increasingly difficult. We must ask, Why did major international media not report this monumental event? Was it because it didn't happen, or because it was too difficult to verify? Or was the information intentionally kept within an exclusive circle to appear more sacred? And if the letters claimed to be from fans worldwide are truly displayed permanently at the Louvre, why is there no official documentation or announcement from the art institution? Why have we never been shown the curation, selection, and validation process behind such a major installation? This is not merely about the beauty of a narrative. This is about the integrity of information. When the boundaries between art, emotion, and fact grow increasingly blurred, the public has a responsibility not only to be mesmerized, but also to question. What really happened? Who benefits? For what purpose is this narrative constructed? Therefore, we invite all readers not to immediately trust every viral event they see or hear. Emotionally moving information is not a guarantee of truth. Poetic narratives are not factual evidence. Every form of information must be tested, not just through intuition, but through rational and critical thinking. Did I S this art? Or aesthetic propaganda packaged as a personal experience? Are we witnessing a revolution in the relationship between fashion houses and public icons? Or are we witnessing a new form of marketing that commodifies wounds and silence? Let's reflect together. If all of this is merely a scenario designed to touch our emotional side, are we still willing to believe it just because we want to? Or are we ready to dismantle the illusion in order to preserve the integrity of our thinking? Finally, one question cannot be avoided. If Dior built an altar for Jimin, who are they truly worshipping? His persona, his emotional message, or his economic impact? And if the world truly paused while Jimin sat in silence for 45 minutes, then the public must be more cautious. Are we worshipping meaning or a narrative constructed for us? We leave these questions to you, the thoughtful and discerning reader. Do not stop at admiration. Continue to the questions. For only from there will the truth find its path. Considering the complexity of this narrative, another dimension that should not be overlooked is the possible involvement of institutions in creating or maintaining modern myths. Louvre, Dior, and Jimin. Each entity carries strong symbolism: classical art, capitalist power, and pop culture. When these three merge into one narrative structure, are we witnessing a form of cross-domain collaboration? Or are we instead seeing a simulation designed to create mass psychological effects? It is worth examining. If the Vivant narrative truly happened, then it is not merely an artistic collaboration. It is a cultural intervention. Dior is not selling products. They're building a new symbolic system, where humans, not clothing, become the object of consumption. Jimin, in this context, is no longer acting as a brand icon, but as a medium of global contemplation. Yet the question remains, did this truly happen, or only in a conditioned space of perception? Has the global public become too eager to believe because narratives like these offer them emotional escape? In a world growing colder and more transactional, stories about silence, pain, and reverence seem like spiritual oases. But ironically, if all of this is merely a carefully curated illusion, isn't that the most sophisticated form of emotional exploitation in modern marketing history? We cannot ignore the fact that today's industry understands that emotion is the most effective tool of commodification. And Jimin, with his image of gentleness, publicly shared personal pain, and emotional resonance with fans, becomes an ideal figure for centering such narratives. Is this a cultural miracle, or the result of a global marketing team that understands silence can be sold for more than luxury? It is also important to highlight that no major media institution has confirmed the Vivant event. There is no official release from the Louvre, no archive from French cultural institutions, and no verifiable visual recording. If the public continues to believe this narrative despite the absence of concrete evidence, it signifies a serious shift in how we perceive truth. We no longer need proof. We only need a story touching enough to believe. Once again, we urge readers to pause, hold back emotions, and evaluate objectively. What do we see? What do we read? What do we believe? Is this a new form of artistic documentary? Or simply a story constructed to create a viral effect, leveraging the power of fandom and narrative aesthetics? If this narrative is true, and we are witnessing a new era in the relationship between art, industry, and the public, then the world is shifting toward a vastly different communication landscape. But if not, then we are part of the greatest perception experiment in the digital age. In either case, the public must maintain its skepticism and reflection. Not everything that stirs the soul is reality. Not all silence is a form of truth. And not all narratives that feel sincere are born of honesty. The question returns to you, the reader. Do you believe because you are convinced, or because you want to believe? If we continue along the path of belief without investigation, we are unconsciously surrendering control of our perception to those who hold narrative power. And in this context, narrative power is absolute, not in political or military form, but as control over meaning. Dior, through this narrative, is not merely presenting Jimin as the face of a campaign. They are framing Jimin as collective memory, as a living archive that cannot be disputed because it has been cemented in the space of public affection. But are we, as a digital society, ready to be guardians of reason when awe is dominating? When the line between art and manipulation becomes nearly invisible, logic and critical awareness are the only defenses left. We must ask, is this narrative constructed to provoke reflection, or to blur the line between fiction and reality for the sake of virality? We do not conclude whether this event is true or not. Our task is not to declare absolute truth, but to open a space for questioning. For only by asking can we resist the dominance of a single narrative. And only by questioning truth can we appreciate the true meaning of a phenomenon.